Zoom.
Are they?
Yeah. It's like merging social media and official media
Yeah,
together.
it's great. Yeah, Zoom's way ahead of everybody else on this stuff.
So, Preeta, sorry to interrupt you guys. Preeta, we can get started. Why don't you start with IoT Forum and CISO platform introduction, and then introduce the panelists, please.
Are we ready?
Get started.
We
We can get started. Yeah, we can get started within the another next 1 minute. That piece is just closing up as well.
Done.
So why don't we start with the introduction, with IoT Forum CISO, because that will take some time. Please.
So right now, are we broadcasted or because then people
Yes,
wouldn't?
Preeta,
Shivi, are we broadcasting? Yeah.
yes, we are broadcasting now. We can get started. We have
Okay,
started the live stream. Let's
Fantastic.
start this one. And I think a very nice suggestion by Brian, we can put our specs on Zoom. This looks really good. Cool, let's get started.
Let's get started. So hello, greetings everybody. Welcome to today's IoTMatrix Intelligent Track for the panel discussion on challenges of securing edge devices. IoTMatrix on its 6th anniversary is the annual conference of IoT Forum. IoT Forum is the think tank initiative of TAI to raise IoT quotient of India. Started in 2014, IoT Forum is now a vibrant community with over 2,000 plus IoT startups, several thousands of active participants with 14 task forces and 100 plus volunteers. IoT Forum initiatives include regular meetups, mentorship, and active community forum on various topics of interest, IoTMatrix awards to top startups, global ecosystem connects, corporate engagements, thought leadership on various topics, and maintaining the repository of 2,000 plus Indian IoT startups. Today in this panel is in association with TAI Bangalore and CISO Platform. I am Preeta, the community manager at CISO Platform, and your panel chair today. A few lines about CISO Platform community's vision. It's been 10 years since we started the CISO Platform community.
So sorry, Preeta, sorry to interrupt you. Shivi, could you just check? There seems to be some problem. The Rostrum Intelligent piece is not showing up. Sorry, some glitches, guys. Just bear with us. Okay, just hang on a second, because I just visited the piece and it's not, the live stream is not showing up.
So,
just give us 2 minutes.
There was some issue.
Shivi, could you just check, please?
Yeah, we have just went live. It's live now.
It's live now?
Yeah. It went blank for a few seconds in between.
No, so what are we streaming at? I see day 1 conclave connected. I see day 2 conclave connected, join. But I don't see the day 1 Rostrum The Intelligent. Can you just double check? Go to stage.
Yes. Wait a minute. Wait a second. I'm just connecting.
Please, sorry, Preeta, you probably have to do a retake. Just
I made a mistake.
It says day 1 rostrum ended. So something is going on.
We're recording the session now?
Yes, we are.
Great. We can do a nice pointer kind of in the end, summarizing this talk.
Got it. Just give us 2 minutes to fix this.
So it is live for audience. Since you are an admin, there is some issue at your end. The audience is able to
So day 1 Rostrum Intelligent is live. Are you sure?
So the Vinay is able to hear your conversations also. Yes, listen to the Preeta session as well.
Okay, I'm seeing. Anyway, let's go ahead.
Yeah, we can get started. I'm also.
Preeta, another retake, please.
Retake? Okay, fine. Great. So guys, those of you who have heard me before, there's going to be a little bit of repetition. So greetings, welcome today to IoTMatrix Intelligent Track for the panel discussion on challenges of securing edge devices. IoTMatrix on its 6th anniversary is the annual conference of IoT Forum. IoT Forum is a think tank initiative of TAI to raise IoT quotient of India. Started in 2014, IoT Forum is now a vibrant community of over 2,000 plus IoT startups. Several thousands of active participants with 14 task forces and 100 plus volunteers. IoT Forum initiatives include regular meetups, mentorship, an active community forum on various topics of interest, IoTMatrix awards to top startups, global ecosystem connects, corporate engagements, thought leadership on various topics, and maintaining the repository of 2,000 plus Indian IoT startups. This panel is in association with TiE Bangalore and CISO Platform. I'm Preetha, Community Manager at CISO Platform, and your panel would be chaired by me today. A few lines about CISO Platform's vision. It's been 10 years since we started CISO Platform community with the vision of collaboration amongst senior security executives. Today, our community has over 4,000 plus members across the globe. Our primary goal has been to create tangible community goods. And as a community, we've been able to create more than 1,000 plus checklists, frameworks, and security training material, which are completely available for free for everybody. We have also conducted more than 50 plus training sessions in schools for kids under the Kids Cyber Safety Initiative. If you're a security professional, I would definitely request you to sign up on CISOplatform.com and become a part of our vision. Moving on to today's session. As we go along into the session, I would request you to keep sharing what you like about the session. If you have questions and various discussion points on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, with hashtag IoTMatrix or even hashtag CISOplatform. Today, our moderator is Arnab Chattopadhyay. He's the Associate Director, IBM Cognitive Business Solutions, a UCL alumnus. He has more than 20 years of experience in the field. He currently heads the IoT Forum, IoT Security Task Force. In this panel, he's representing IoT Forum Security Task Force. Welcome, Arnab. Over to you for today's interesting session.
Thank you, Preetha. Very quickly, somebody just pinged me saying that when they're going into Rostrum and clicking join now, it's saying the session is over. Please have a look.
Arnab, you continue because the session is live for me. There might be some lag, but the audience is able to see.
Great. All right. Thanks, Preetha, and let me welcome to this esteemed panel. We have really set of wonderful and very experienced people from the industry. Let me do a very quick introduction before we jump into our discussion. Dr. Kinshuk Banerjee, SVP Hitachi Research. Prior to Hitachi, he was a partner with IBM Global Service, leading his cognitive business. His area of focus is data science, AI, ML. Kinshuk, welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Professor Sandeep Shukla, he is a professor of computer science and engineering at IIT Kanpur and a program director for C3I and the National Blockchain Project. He's also a fellow of IEEE and ACM. Welcome, Professor, yet again. I hope it's going to be a very interesting discussion like last time. Scott Hankins. Scott is a very well-known innovator and entrepreneur. Scott was the founder of pt-2 Networks. And very interestingly, he was one of the key brains behind SD-WAN technology. A Stanford alumnus, Scott has worked with NASA prior to joining the excitement of Silicon Valley. Scott, welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
Kiro Mishra, global head of entity, where Kiro leads the 1 billion plus business unit, and he heads the cybersecurity business of entity. Kiro, welcome. We are keen to hear from you. And the last one in the panel is Brian D. Lemos. Brian is a veteran exec in cybersecurity industry. He runs large sales GTM teams and working closely with IoT startups and associates. So all of you, welcome again. What we're going to do is, we kind of understand that generally people and industry understand IoT security is a very important aspect of IoT. And when we talk about IoT, we are not today considering the cloud aspect of it. That's why Preetha mentioned about the edge aspect of it. It's primarily to deal with the live devices, the edge network, the edge devices up to the cloud, not inside the cloud. So we'll focus our discussion on that part of it. The first question I'm going to start is probably in the mind of many people. that, yeah, people know that it is very important to have security for IoT, but we still don't see the enthusiasm of what we see in IT security, and that must be a very valid reason. So the first question is on that. From your experience, what are the key asks or demands from the user organizations to the supplier organizations, which helps them adopting IoT security best practices at a faster rate with a lot of enthusiasm? You could focus on adequacy of technology, cost structure, regulation, or any other groups. So, Kiro, I'll go to you first on this.
Sure. Anup, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I would say from a user of IoT standpoint and from practitioner of IoT security standpoint to basically address the need of the users, they are looking at the next generation solutions across devices, network, and applications when it comes to IoT security. And as we all know, historically, the primary source for most of the IoT security issues has been that the manufacturers do not spend enough time and resources on embedding security into the IoT devices. For instance, most Bluetooth-enabled fitness trackers remain visible long after
just
the
a
first
quick
pair.
piece. Kiro, could you just on your camera? We can't see you.
Kiro is driving, so
okay, I'm sorry. Okay, got it.
No,
sorry,
problem.
Kiro, please go on.
So yeah, so in situations like that, as we know, right, all this smart refrigerator, when in use, we can expose your Gmail credentials and all of it. We know the devices related issues that all the IoT security issues are being spoken about. So when it comes to the expectations from users, most of the users are talking about how do we get security embedded into the devices manufacturing through the security by design approach, and how do they bring that DevOps and SecOps situations and drive close integration between them to embed security into the next generation of IoT security devices. That's one. From a network standpoint, when we keep hearing from people, and we are seeing increasing convergence and confluence of IT, OT, IIoT networks across various industries and verticals, there's a requirement of an integrated approach towards that network security monitoring, right? Various kind of data packets being exchanged across the same network, and how do we distinguish the issues and the vulnerabilities? And while many network security solutions are pivoting towards threat prevention, there's an increased focus that we are getting to hear from users as well as vendors are also to design solutions and processes to detect and respond to those threats faster from a network security standpoint. And when I look at, let's say, from an application standpoint, let's say from an IoT applications, an increasing number of IoT applications are leveraging containers these days in terms of development and are anchored around microservices architecture. While the whole application is structured as loosely coupled collection of services that are independently deployable and maintainable, the requirement from IoT security standpoint would be to how to secure individual containers of those applications. So when we talk to users, their concerns are multidimensional. They look at device, network, and applications, and their expectations are that they should be secured across all the three layers. Arnav, back to you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Kiro. So it's been a good coverage. So we kind of understood that it is not only the device or only the network. It is actually a combination of both. Now, with that, I will come to Scott. Scott, since you have done a lot of work in network area, so do you think that is it the lack of adequate technology that we are not there, or why are we not able to adopt those practices in the network? What is lacking right now?
Yeah, so from the network perspective, if you're trying to secure your IoT environment or an enterprise that has IoT devices or OT devices, traditionally with like application-aware firewall, the first step is understanding what's on your network. At the application level, that that built up with trying to understand at the wire level what's going on. But with just this explosion and the rapid adoption of not just the number of devices, but the variety of devices, it makes it very difficult for the sort of the traditional approaches of network security, particularly visibility, to keep track of what's on the network, to understand what's on the network, such that the IT administrators, the security professionals, can adequately apply policies to those devices. So you know, certainly from the network side, the network security side, that's the challenge that the industry is having to catch up with and deal with. Certainly, the reason that problem exists in the first place is as Kira just mentioned, is the manufacturers are trying to get their products to market very quickly and aren't necessarily building the security into the devices in the first place. So it ends up being the responsibility of the enterprises that are deploying that to make sure that their network is addressing potential vulnerabilities within the devices that they're deploying.
Right, now that's a very, very interesting area, because whenever I have a discussion in the security community is an IoT, it's always some device versus network. If you look at the regulation, a lot of regulation are put on the devices split, and we know that there is a challenge because device is a volume game and unit cost impacts devices sell.
Absolutely.
So then the question is that if we really have to balance that inadequacy of devices into network, what are the kind of technology that we are looking for? Because network is where the intelligence lies and more power of processing lies. So is it on the side of the intelligence that matters, or is the basic protocol needs to be changed, or basic way we look at security needs to be changed?
Yeah, so that's where the AI really comes in. So trying to keep up with this constant influx and variety of devices, the traditional, like I mentioned, the traditional approaches of analyzing signatures, building signatures to recognize devices, is having a hard time keeping up. So being able to apply artificial intelligence, particularly machine learning, to be able to very quickly adapt and learn what the devices are, and then being able to figure out if they're a concern or not, is really the cutting edge now. Sort of how you can apply this AI, this intelligence, into solving these problems, it's going to require even advances. Not necessarily in the fundamentals of AI or the fundamentals of ML, but really being able to understand how to adapt that to, say, where it's been really, really strong in image recognition or natural language processing, to be able to adapt that to almost, as opposed to speech recognition, understanding sort of the network traffic recognition. So there's a lot of interesting work going on in that area.
Right. So it is kind of basically near time ability to understand the anomaly on it. Now that's a very, very interesting area, and I keep on having discussion with Professor Shukla on this one. So Sandeep, what's your view on this? Has it changed, or what do you think about it?
So my experience is mostly on the industrial IoT in power system and manufacturing control, water treatment plants, and so on. And one of the things that I find is that depending on the regulatory requirements of a country, the manufacturers often implement certain security standards that are already there in these devices, and if the regulatory structure is not there, regulations are not there or not enforced, then they don't care about doing that. And we have seen that repeatedly in India. The other thing that I find is that in India in general, especially in the government PSUs, there is a huge lack of interest, awareness, and will to actually consider security as a priority. Functionality, takes the cake, and therefore they don't care so much about security. And we actually, when we talk about them, talk to them, and the first thing I ask is, what is your, do you have a cybersecurity policy document? And most of the time the answer is, what is that? And unless it is under a regulatory requirement by certain industries, they don't have a cybersecurity policy. And recently we designed a policy document based on SANS Institute templates for one of the organizations, I wouldn't name, and they were very upset. It was so big and thick that they were not very happy. But so the other problem that I find very challenging in the IoT is that how do you actually ensure that each device has an identity that is that cannot be usurped by a malicious actor or a malicious device? And there has been some proposals to use PUFs and AMD trust zone and all that technology, but most of the time, due to cost constraints and expedience and so on, those things are not implemented. So we find very hard to actually even consider the putting IoT logs and access information on blockchain kind of solution, because we are often confronted with this unique identity issue that we look at. And final two things that I want to mention is that there is a huge lack of trained professionals in India around this technology, even in security in general, but in OT security, ICS security, there is a huge lack of talent and professionally trained people. And then there is no risk model. So private industry may be different, but in the PSUs and so on, there is no notion of risk model. And if they have a risk model, it's in their minds, not in any kind of shape or form. So therefore, cybersecurity takes a backseat. And with the increased use of IoT, this is becoming more and more scary. That's I would say that's how it is.
Yeah, it is very interesting, scary and exciting both, because you actually pointed to a very interesting area, which is device identity. Now, we all know that device identity had been a big challenge, especially with the low power devices, constrained devices. And there are different approaches using AI that's being attempted. Now, on that point, I will move to Kinshuk, because his team is working around that area. So Kinshuk, is going to be a little bit difficult question. There's a challenge in the IoT world all the while, that device identity is a difficult thing. You really can't have a certificate inside those small devices. PUF is experimental, and PUF also expose other attack surfaces. So the thing that you are doing is primarily on the server side and using adequate use of artificial intelligence. If you could throw some light and let us know what interesting stuff going on, that would be great.
Yeah, so Samo, thank you. So device identity, of course, this is a huge problem. Now think of one of those World War movies where a spy gets into the enemy side, puts the hood on and tries to sneak into. So this is exactly the behavior, some aberrant, some different, something not usual behavior that we have got to watch out for if we really want to sniff out those rogue devices which are playing in your environment. Now, to do that, just as Scott was mentioning, that AI comes in very handy, because now if you look for those aberrant behaviors, B, you inject one of your devices which is constantly doing challenge response in that swarm of devices and trying to ask, are you an authentic guy? That's the second way. And the third thing, there are two areas of artificial intelligence: federated learning, GANs, the generative assistive network, mostly working on the cloud side though, that comes in very handy for near real time, responses. Because if you push it to the cloud, you do one thing: you are actually making better use. I mean, your cost competitiveness increases, as opposed to embedding all that thing in the devices, on the edge devices. On the other hand, you have to have that real time experience. So we have to optimize between the two. But essentially we have to, I think the best way to do it is to use AI and keep looking for that aberrant behavior all throughout in your environment of collaboration.
Thanks, Nishuk. So yes, definitely. So we will probably do a little bit more detail into it. But now I'll come to Brian. Um, Brian, you are associated with SOC, and that is kind of area. And I'm sure you must be. Are you doing anything on IoT? SOC.
Right. I agree with a lot of what's been said, that the main challenges right now are awareness that security needs to be built into the products and solutions at time of manufacture. Because right now security is an afterthought for a lot of IoT environments. Visibility, I think Kiro mentioned it, is king. Privacy becomes an issue. When it comes to the marketplace, it's really important to understand that the people making the decisions at corporations are somewhat challenged or in conflict. You have your traditional CISO, and that role might not be as focused on IoT security as the title sounds. You have facilities management, which can often be very focused on what gets brought into the environment, but doesn't necessarily have a securities budget. And then you have the CIO, which is focused on the overall environment's ability to automate, maximize the potential of IT. You have technicians who are very hands-on, and IoT security, OT security can often fall in between the cracks of who even owns it in the corporation. So that role and that focus is something that we as manufacturers and as thinkers in this space need to help our colleagues really carve out and start to prioritize. I've seen some efforts, some interesting efforts going on. I saw an effort the other day from Carnegie Mellon here in the United States to create an IoT nutrition label, which would, and this would be voluntary at first. So the idea is pretty interesting, where every IoT device would come with an overview of what information that device would include. So when you hooked it up to your environment, you would know what could be broadcasted. It would come with a security mechanisms label that would provide automatic and manual information as to whether the security was being updated through the air or manual process. It would tell you what their data practices were and what the mechanisms were for that data collection, and then any kind of help desk and privacy practice information that would be on it. Because right now, if you look in U.S. corporations in specific, the proliferation of devices, from phones, printers, intercom systems, electronics that are intentionally purchased or brought in from employees, like video gaming devices, cameras, there's GPS devices, wearables, even synchronized clock systems between conference centers, for example, smart building data, security cameras. There's so much brought in that facilities management isn't necessarily thinking about security and the communication between these devices. So you have the problem that it's not built in from the manufacturing perspective. You have the problem that there's and we're talking about visibility, but I'm using the word a little bit differently. I'm saying visibility that people who are purchasing and connecting these devices don't have visibility into what those devices are connecting to, but also what they are able to gather and what they're putting out. And then you have organizations that aren't set up from an organizational design perspective to even address this problem in the first place. So it's a big challenge that's going to go through a lot of maturation cycles, and we're just at the very beginning of it.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid, great point, Brian. I was in fact thinking that like IT security also at one point started at very ad hoc basis, and today what we see is quite a bit of maturity has achieved, although we have to do more. But at least in the platform software level, we have done quite decently. Now, my question is that do you really see a trend that kind of maturity life cycle is under development, or it is still very ad hoc right now, and is there an effort to build it like that in IoT security?
I could take first, and then let's hand it off to some other folks. But I still see IoT security as an afterthought, and I still see it very much as a networking discussion and not as much as a security discussion. And that is slowly changing. It's changing though with aftermarket services from third-party companies like Synex, for example, has a big practice in this area. In fact, a lot of companies are putting together aftermarket IoT security packages, assessments, professional services, etc. And it's still not, in many organizations that I see, not a line item in the budget or in the planning of the CIO or the CISO. Certain organizations are adding it to their security posture, but that is from the security vendor, not from the device manufacturer, right? And there is very little coordinated approach to solving IoT. Now, I think that is increasing in the ICS space, with companies like Dragos, for example, doing a lot in the ICS space. And maybe that's because that's critical infrastructure, maybe because there's a lot of nation state support for that type of work, given what's at risk. But overall in enterprise, we are at the very beginning of the beginning.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So Kiro, I will probably come to you next. What's your view about this IoT security maturity, especially you offer large-scale security services? Are you thinking about bringing in a new way of providing service or new kind of services?
Sure. So Arnab, let me answer that in two pieces. One is maturity of IoT security, and let me focus predominantly on the IIoT side, because that's where we play as a service provider, right? So if we look at it over the past couple of years, enterprises definitely have understood the damaging impact that IIoT security or not having IIoT security could lead to, right? For instance, we all might recall the damage that was created by Mirai bot attack in 2016, right? Yeah. And nobody initially guessed that, nobody had probably understood that, but a widespread DDoS attack was executed, which infected hundreds and thousands of IP cameras, which are non-IT devices. And that essentially led to bringing down the DNS that was providing services to IT platforms like GitHub, Twitter, Reddit, and others. So there's a huge interlock between IT and non-IT devices in any ecosystem, be it a utility-driven industry or let's say very generic banking industry. And that said, most of the organizations now have understood the impact. And that way, I would say the market appreciation for the need of IoT security is growing. And if we go by numbers, I think Gartner is predicting that around the spend in this space alone would be around $3 billion by 2021. And that's a huge number. So that's one side of the story. Second side of the story is what we are doing for customers. So traditionally, many of the security services providers or security solutions providers like us have focused on the IT side, which has matured a lot over the last 2 decades, I would say. And as Brian was alluding to, and as Dr. Shukla was also mentioning, ICS security is a big piece, and it's a big piece for our business as well. And we are looking at various kind of solutions to bring to customers and IIoT and ICS security. The challenge there, and I would say the business driver for us, is long enough this IT and OT had been air gapped, and there were no solutions which were taking care of both in an integrated way. So we were, or other customers were, getting visibility into their vulnerabilities and challenges in an isolated way. And you cannot correlate those as long as you are seeing that in an isolated way. So what is happening now is we are looking at ways and means to bring those things together and provide an integrated risk visibility, integrated threat visibility across your ICS and IT stack. And we do have some solutions. We are developing our own practices, and we are hopeful that soon we'll have something. And Brian also alluded about Dragos, right? And very interestingly, you guys might have noticed that earlier this week, National Grid, one of the very large utilities companies in the US, put in $110 million in their Series C for Dragos. And that says it all, right? So that's the kind of need that they have, that the kind of trust on some of the technologies that are coming up. And maybe we'll go back to what Dr. Shukla was mentioning in terms of lack of talent, lack of policies, lack of procedures. And I would not be surprised to see in next coming years, a few years, an integrated platform, which is essentially handling both IT and ICS in a well-orchestrated way. And that's where we are heading towards.
Oh yeah, I think that's certainly a great news and very encouraging that finally we are really looking forward to an integrated platform. Scott, what's your view about how confident and you think is going to happen? And the second is, do you really see the evolution happening differently in IIoT and consumer IoT?
Well, so I think the integration is going to happen, particularly in enterprise environments, and sort of that where you do have a spread between the common players of an IoT side of the house and the OT side of the house that has traditionally been air gapped. As OT gets smarter and smarter, and you're applying more of that intelligence in there, all of the challenges that OT has been, or IT has been addressing for the last 20 years is suddenly going to be upon the OT side. So it makes sense for that technology to converge, and any enterprise that is faced with both of those problems is going to look at a common budget for solving that. Then you're faced with well, what are the products, and are the products able to address both in the same way? I think the ICS environment is a little different when you get particularly low level and you're dealing with PLCs and various industrial controls. But from a manufacturing or warehouse environment where you start to see the real benefits of automation coming into play, that technology is going to start to look very much like the traditional IT problems, except instead of keeping track of where your users are going, or your employees, what they're doing on the network, now you have to keep track of what the devices are doing and where they're going.
Do you foresee there's a threat, especially if you talk about industrial IoT, this kind of thing? There was a very famous hack happened by a hacker in the United States, which managed to hack the Jeep remotely, and they had actually used the Verizon cellular network using picocell. They did manage to do that. Now, which means one thing is for sure, that there is a part of the network which is a common, which is connecting to different specialized network. You can bring in a lot of controls on the IIoT networks, ICS networks, but what about the general purpose network, which is actually doing an interconnect? Do you really see there's a evolution happening in the security protocols or standards over there?
So when you start looking at security at the sort of the broader internet level, like a scenario where you've got a vehicle connected through Verizon, I think it's going to be a while. Certainly the level of intelligence that starts in the enterprise tends to eventually make its way into the carriers. But it lags quite a bit. The carriers have different motivations for what they're focusing on, and they don't typically adopt security until it starts to really impact their throughput, unless they're trying to sell that as an additional service. But the way the security is starting to be implemented, particularly as cloud side services, where the intelligence is actually operating within the cloud and within the data centers, like Palo Alto's, Prisma solution, and other technologies that are instead of being implemented in appliances on the wire, you've got a sort of a more integrated intelligence. I think that'll make it easier for the carriers to adopt technology and integrate it
right,
sort of incrementally, and that's a positive side. I think it's still going to lag, but there's a much more clear path to how to fold those solutions into a carrier, and give more of that give a broad level of sort of that ambient security over internet traffic, which would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. That's great. That's great insight. Kingshuk, I'll come to you next. So one thing was very clear that we have to treat IIoT, industrial IoT, and from the other IoTs slightly differently, because they are growing differently, maturity different, regulation different, environment is different. From an AI point of view, are you really looking that there are different specific focus on building some techniques, or you are probably going to utilize existing techniques and build specific solutions? Kingshuk, you're on mute. Kingshuk, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
So right now in the industry, if you look at it like in Hitachi or in my prior job in IBM, there is already a whole bunch of technologies, techniques that are available today. I was referring to a little bit of that GANs, the adversarial network, the federated learning techniques and all that we can use. And there are many other ways we can do that. So is there any specific movement? I have not seen that yet. One of the things, by the way, that awareness thing, appreciation for IoT in the industry, we all understand. I mean, I have come across many situations where security architecture, security thing is an afterthought, especially in the IT systems. And then one way to rectify that, if we can start right in the design thinking sessions on the use cases. Today, majority of the interesting implementations start with use cases. With the use cases, we model the security threat as one of the actors, as one of the important agents that's actually interacting with the system. And from there on, now on the back end, looking at the artificial intelligence techniques, the analytics, AI, which play a very important role. One thing that I am seeing is this automated bots, the agents that are continuously monitoring the network in IT systems, not so much in the embedded devices at the moment, that are coming in play. In many of the large bank and claims, like say for example, real-time claim insurance or real-time loan approval. Just some time back, we have been working with a US East Coast bank. And for that, those automated bots, automated security agents, they are getting embedded in the IT systems. So that is one trend that I can clearly see. But on the embedded device side, I think we still have to do a little bit more. And just as Professor Shukla said, some regulations are also needed, probably.
Yeah, thanks, Kingshuk. Pritha, how are we doing with the time?
We have some time around 15, 16 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay. So, Professor Shukla, then the next question is for you, and it's going to be the slightly interesting part. See, what we have seen is if you already have an existing infrastructure, then changing that becomes a very challenging because you have to undo a lot of things or probably have to throw away investment. Having said that, the developing nations who are just about to come into the this IoT bandwagon, do you think they have a better opportunity to leapfrog to the more established ones because they will be starting from a new headline, new baseline? So, what's your view on that?
Well, before I get to that, let me say a few things about what we were discussing before. So one of the problem that I see, so Kingshuk was talking about this agents on the devices, on the edge devices, and having them to send data. And I do a lot of installation of this, host intrusion detection system, network intrusion detection systems, and one of the concern that I have is that when you put agent designed by somebody else, implemented by somebody else on your device, and it's a critical system, it's a very concerning thing that often the power utility may not even accept because for them the reliability and continuation, business continuity is very important. The other thing that I find problematic is that people who work in IoT and IoT security, at least in India, I find that they're coming mostly from the embedded systems background, and for them it's the device and the system running on the device that kind of seems to be the universe. Whereas this problem, in case of IoT security, the problem is somewhere else because the devices are low cost and they are not going to be having the security measures that the manufacturers are supposed to put in. And therefore you have to put the security out of the device and also have the right sense of passive monitoring and other kind of things. But having said that, I don't see whole lot of research in India that I say that I am hopeful that things will actually improve. In fact, any research, any kind of tool development or technology development in this is in the industry mostly, not in the labs of the academic institutions. Now, as you mentioned that can the developing countries leapfrog in this technology? So in terms of getting things up and running, they can leapfrog. For example, India was latecomer in, let's say, in mobile technology, so they directly went to 2G, and then very quickly to 3G and pivot into 4G, which is not really 4G, as anybody who uses a phone in India knows that well, that 4G is not, that's 3.5G, and then now they are all in the bandwagon of 5G, which I think is, and none of them are thinking adequately about security. They do some lip service to security, but they are not really taking seriously the security as I see it. And therefore, yes, technology deployment, they will leapfrog, but security, they will be even far behind than developed countries because they're not even thinking about security. They don't have policy, regulation, and investment in security. So I don't see that that happen.
I think it's a very interesting insight. Quite scary though. Uh, I just hope that we do even more research on that. Um, Anyone else on this point? Do you really think that leapfrogging gives you a better opportunity?
Better opportunity for making money by the companies that put up the infrastructure for sure, but security and privacy is not in their minds. And as you can see, the services of voice calls in India has been pretty poor, and the regulatory oversight on that has not been adequate. So I think that unless the regulatory bodies actually clamp down on them and say that, you know, you have to have security, you cannot have this kind of downtimes and all that stuff. I don't see them doing it.
Yeah, I think there's two parallel paths that not sure if they'll intersect. There's mission critical and business enablement, right? The mission critical technologies are what we're talking about here: power infrastructure, water, things like that, and then business enablement technologies. The intelligence agencies at all of our respective countries are very well aware of the security threats in the mission critical infrastructure environments. Lots of great books and talks on that topic. And so we'll have to see if our politicians and our leaders push that requirement down to vendors and manufacturers in that space. On the business enablement side, it still very much seems like a nice to have. In healthcare, which is a little bit different though, in healthcare, I see that there is a growing awareness of the requirements for IoT. It's a little bit interesting though about how you get there, because it's security as a byproduct of economic fundamentals, which is, I have an MRI machine, it costs a tremendous amount of money, it is network connected, and I would like to really understand what this machine is doing at all times and what it can see and who can see it. That's a privacy and a security problem that can get solved by aftermarket devices, because the MRI manufacturers aren't necessarily putting that in. But at the same time, it solves a problem. It solves the security challenge. At the same time, in healthcare, though, that MRI machine could be connected to, I mean, it sounds funny, but like a Windows 95 device, not really Windows 95, but it's pretty old. And there's a lot of stuff in healthcare that actually can't even be upgraded, and that is quite vulnerable. And if you tried to upgrade it, the upgrades don't exist. So that means that healthcare is going through a retrenchment, because they have so much equipment that does need more modern operating systems. And at the same time, the process to digitize all of the records of patients is in process as well. And that's converging with security quite well in healthcare. So I see IoT in healthcare growing more and more, and being a topic that that healthcare leadership, be it anything under the CIO, whether it's CISO or facilities, is more and more focused on.
Great, I think it's a wonderful insight. Now probably we have reached to our probably the last question on the forum. Sorry, yeah.
Arnab, just to probably add on that, and that's a critical point that yes, Professor Shukla and Brian also mentioned.
Please.
Two things, right? One is economic inspiration, and second is regulatory compulsion. So economic inspiration, very nicely explained by Brian. Coming back to the regulatory need that Professor Shukla was referring to, last week in the US, you might have heard about the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act was signed by the president of the US as a law for the US. And that essentially will address the supply chain risk to the federal government stemming from the insecure IoT devices, which are being used by various federal agencies, right? And shortly, we can expect to have National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, issuing recommendations for secure development, identity management, patching, and configuration management for IoT devices, which are the much needed guidelines and suggestions for this industry. And that will also give confidence for commercial users to use that in the ecosystem. So that those kind of development, those kind of awareness from government standpoint is going to definitely boost the adoption, and the right kind of adoption, I would say, not where only you throw in cheap devices, putting everything at risk Rather, you are producing devices which are not only functional, but also secure.
Exactly. I think it's a very, very important point to take. So we have 5 more minutes, Britha.
There's a great question by Sam in the chat
Yeah,
that maybe
that's
we
right.
all could address. Sam saying, what do you think is going to cause be a catalyst for the industry to sort this out and sort out security? I'll take 30 seconds on that and then
Sure.
hand it off. So I've been in the security space for a long time now, and I remember it wasn't even that long ago, maybe even 10 years ago, where if we met with a CISO, it was kind of a big deal. And if we had multiple meetings with CISOs, it was kind of impressive. And then some things happened, right? The Target breach, the OPM breach, the Sony hack. There were some big things that happened that really brought security to the forefront of boards and government's minds. And they started to realize this is an area that's a lot more than endpoint protection and firewalls. And so I'm sorry to say this, but unfortunately, I think that what will change things is the visibility of bad things happening tends to be a catalyst. And the one of the reasons for that is IoT sec is still seen as an add-on cost. And immediately what people do is that they look at, well, what's my cost per device or my cost per user? Is that in the budget? Am I willing to pay for it? Because the hookup hasn't happened yet of the liability, right? So
Right.
that's Sam, that's my take on your question.
There's another question. I want to scale my business. How do I do that? If I have to connect my IoT devices to already existing systems.
Well, regulation. Otherwise, you will not take security seriously, at least in India.
So absolutely, I agree. Regulations should help. But I truly believe maybe there is gonna be one or two black swan events, something really disastrous that will bring the focus back here to security, not as an afterthought anymore.
True. Okay. So any more questions?
I've sent a few from the audience in the chat box. Just select
Yeah,
the ones which are relevant, which we can take up.
I was reading that. So recommendation best practices in IoT, we already discussed about it. So, okay, since we don't have and we just have 2 more minutes, let me quickly try to summarize. I have, taken notes from all of your discussion. And it's a very good learning, personally for me, definitely. So first thing is next generation solution attempts to embed security for IoT. We look forward for ever evolving security solutions for IoT primarily, and in other areas of IoT like we have done for IT security. The regulatory environment has come up as one of the main key driver. I think most of the people, participant had mentioned that it has to be either a push, pull, supportive regulatory environment that will certainly move the IoT security to a great extent. OT-IT integration is going to be the very important factor, especially in the ICS space. AI is going to play a pivotal role in making it more intelligent, and especially the unseen circumstances which we cannot think about right now. Healthcare and IoT combination has potential to grow after ICS. It's a pretty promising field of like. Economic inspiration is another thing which would actually help if we really see some direct value coming out of IoT security. NIST regulation best practices will introduce a lot of confidence, and I think it would be a major step towards introducing IoT security. And the last thing is hooking up with liability in designing system will certainly help in maturing IoT security. Did I miss anything?
Hey, Arnab, can I ask a quick, just
sure.
more of a poll questions to every one of the panelists? I mean, it seems like the US president has signed the law. As Kiro mentioned, NIST is going to start putting in some standards and so forth in place, which is good news. India is far behind on this right now. What do you guys think? I mean, you guys have been in the security field for long. I mean, these phases as these regulations and so forth come out, what's the time frame do you guys think it will go mainstream? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Any timeline, unless and until, of course, a black swan event happens, right? But what do you guys believe we are looking from a timeline? Is it going to accelerate, get mainstream? That means everybody thinking through in the next 3 years, 5 years, 1 year?
Let me take a shot at that. So this is when we go back to this IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act. This is initially targeted at federal agencies and essentially government establishments. So they would start following that, and then we will see trickle down effect for commercial segments in the US, and very soon other geographies would come in with that. And if you have to put a timeline, I would say it's a game of 5 to 10 years when we start things settling down. But I would say this is a huge opportunity for especially our entrepreneurs, friends from India. They could look at this as a huge potential to think differently and create solutions which are aligned with all these regulations being rolled out by NIST, and how they can develop solutions which will be relevant to global markets. In fact, there are a lot of new initiatives happening in the US, very nice boutique solutions being developed. They could definitely look at those and take that. And the advantage for India is the scale of IoT, given the operational scale that we have, could be very defining to drive reverse innovation for the world.
Got it.
So I think that Indian entrepreneurs can build solutions which should be taken up by US and European Union, but the timeline that you ask, so is in my view in India is infinity, unless organizations like TIE and TIE IoT Wing actually do the pushing of the governments and including the state governments.
Correct.
To take it seriously.
No, actually, to a certain extent, we have done that. Even 3 years back, we started this. So we are talking with Arvind Tiwari, was heading our IoT security aspects. So even Dr. Gulshan Rai from the PMO's office, Chief CISO of India, he actually came in and had a long discussion with us as well. Any other thoughts, any other timelines? Would you guys agree with Kiro's 5 to 10 or shorter, longer, or
I would agree.
Okay.
I would agree with that 5 to 10 thing. It seems very reasonable, unless there is a public service utility design in some government.
Scott, I think you are very close to this. Healthcare would come sooner.
Yeah, so it'll be a continuous increase. There's definitely the presence. If I look back, I really first started being aware of this, really thinking about this space about 4 years ago, and there's just there's way more awareness of it. I mean, we've thrown out the names of companies that didn't even exist back then that are really solving this problem. I mean, I'm not sure when Drago started, but it was they haven't been around that long. So the idea that from the entrepreneurial perspective, that there's a problem that needs to be solved, and people are actually investing money in it and buying the solutions is a very encouraging sign. And as that snowball starts rolling and growing, more and more companies will come on board. I think a lot of the players are going to wait until that, or there's an expectation that the solution would come in with the products that they've already got, they've already purchased. looking at you, Palo Alto, but but there's certainly opportunities for the technology advancement to happen within the early adopters. So, you know, is it going to take, you know, 5 to 10 years? I don't think so. At least not in the environment that, you know, in the U.S. enterprise environment. It's definitely moving up that priority list of what the IT folks are spending money on.
I agree with that. I think it's going to go faster here. I think it's going to come from third-party vendors and not the OEM manufacturers.
Also from DARPA.
Oh.
What was your comment, question?
Would anything happen from DARPA?
DARPA?
No, I think that, like, for example, for connected vehicles and for cyber security of vehicles, unmanned vehicles, almost 10 years ago, they started programs in DARPA. So I think that DARPA is very much watching various spaces and technology surprises, and they are actually doing this. And I wouldn't be surprised, I haven't checked if DARPA already has some programs already running on this IoT security. But we need similar setup in India where such agency will actually incubate technologies like that.
Yeah, sounds good. So, I mean, thanks a lot. I'll probably, it's past 10 out here. So I see the tired faces of Preeta and Arnav. So we will end out here. So thank you all for all the panelists, Brian, Scott, Kiro, Sandeep. I mean, thank you profusely for coming on and just giving us your insights and so forth. And as you know, at IoT Forum, we are kind of, it's a 2,000 plus IoT security companies, IoT companies. And all of these guys are essentially at some point will be struggling with IoT security aspects. In fact, 3 years back, we did a hackathon on all of the, I think there were like 20 products, IoT products. And the hackathon, the white hat hackers broke all of these devices within 6 hours, right? So that was the hackathon all about. So I'd love to, you know, and Arnav is going to be, is actually leading along with a few other folks, our IoT Forum security, and would love to engage with you guys on a continuous basis from IoT Forum. So thanks a lot. And for the audience, you know, this is the end for the day one. Day two begins at 8:45 a.m. We have a full day with almost close to 30 or so sessions. And for the rest of you in the panel, please do join us. We have a full day, at least for the US folks, the morning time is nighttime for you guys. We have got some very excellent sessions on sustainability, on Spacetech in India, on agri-tech. A Japan panel is coming on. So we got a full house. The website is theiotmatrix.org. Please do visit and see the agenda, and you can come in on and watch some of these sessions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye for now.